Dad, from now on, you'll do what Mark says. He's the head of this family now. That sentence, spoken by my own daughter, Lisa, across the polished oak dining table of her suburban home in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Her tone was sharp, decisive, and full of a cold finality that I had never expected to hear from her. My fork froze halfway to my mouth, and for a moment I thought I'd misheard. But then Mark, her husband, leaned back in his chair with that smug smirk of his and added, "That's right, old man. Times have changed. You either fall in line or you get out of the way." The roast beef on my plate might as well have been stone. My throat closed, and I could barely swallow. I was their father, the man who had raised Lisa after her mother passed, the man who worked double shifts at the plant to make sure she had braces, prom dresses, and a college education. And now, I was being told to obey, like a servant in my own family. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. I had always imagined my daughter would marry someone decent, someone kind, hard-working, maybe a man from town with calloused hands and a steady heart. Instead, she married Mark Henderson, a lawyer with slicked-back hair, a leased BMW, and a tongue sharp enough to cut glass. He came from money, or at least that's what he told everyone, but I'd always had the nagging feeling that his wealth was smoke and mirrors. From the moment they married, Mark made it clear he didn't respect me. He'd snicker whenever I shared a story, roll his eyes when I offered advice, and once, during Thanksgiving, he actually said, "Lisa, your dad's living in the past. We don't need his outdated ways anymore." I let it slide for my daughter's sake. But tonight, being told by Lisa herself to obey her husband was a knife to the chest. I sat there quietly, staring at my plate as their words rang in my ears. Lisa didn't even look ashamed. She was sipping her wine, her diamond wedding ring catching the light from the chandelier above. Her eyes focused on Mark, like he was the sun she revolved around. My voice cracked as I finally asked, "Is this really how you see me? After everything?" Lisa didn't hesitate. "Dad, you've done your part. But you're outdated. Mark knows how to handle things now. If you want to keep being part of this family, you'll need to respect that." I nodded slowly, trying to keep my composure. The taste of betrayal was bitter in my mouth. I wanted to scream, to remind her of the nights I sat up with her when she had the flu, the hours I worked to pay off her student loans, the mortgage I co-signed so she and Mark could buy this very house. But instead, I pushed my chair back and said nothing. Mark leaned forward, his voice low and smug. "Good. Glad you understand." But I didn't understand. Not then. All I knew was that the daughter I'd loved and sacrificed for had just chosen her arrogant husband over her own blood. That night, as I lay awake in the small guest room they'd shoved me into, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above, something hardened inside me. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was too old, too soft, too beaten down to stand up for myself. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee and buttered toast filling the air. Lisa was at the counter, scrolling on her phone, while Mark sat at the head of the table in a crisp shirt, looking like he owned the place. "Morning," I said quietly. Pulling out a chair, Mark didn't even glance up. "Coffee's for us, not for freeloaders." I froze, my hand halfway to the pot. Freeloaders. I had co-signed the mortgage for this very house. My retirement savings had been drained to help them get the down payment when Mark's trust fund turned out to be tied up in legal complications. Without me, they wouldn't be living in this two-story home with its manicured lawn and granite countertops. Lisa put her hand on Mark's arm. "Don't say that, Mark," she murmured. But her tone wasn't protective of me. It was appeasing him. She didn't even look at me. I sat down silently, my stomach churning. I buttered a piece of toast, but every bite tasted like ash. Finally, I asked, Lisa, do you remember who made the first payment on this place? Who guaranteed the loan when the bank wouldn't? Mark chuckled, finally looking at me. His smile was sharp as glass. And do you remember who's been paying it since? Me, not you. So don't go acting like this house is yours. You're a guest here, an unwanted one at that. My hands clenched around my fork. For a moment, I considered reminding him that without my signature, without my credit, he'd still be renting a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Cedar Rapids. But I swallowed the words. Something told me that silence would serve me better now. Maybe I should find my own place, I said softly. Mark's smirk widened. Now you're talking sense. Lisa gave me a quick glance, almost guilty, but not guilty enough to speak up. Not guilty enough to defend me? I excused myself, retreating to the guest room. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the suitcase I'd never unpacked. My heart felt heavy, but underneath that weight was a spark of anger, of clarity. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a burden. They had no idea the kind of power I still held. Later that day, I stopped by the local diner on Main Street, the kind with neon lights in the window and the smell of frying bacon that clung to your clothes. I ordered a cup of black coffee and pulled out my phone. My old friend Dale, who worked as a loan officer at Cedar Valley Bank, picked up on the second ring. Dale, it's Tom, I said. I need to talk to you about the Henderson mortgage. There was a pause. The one you co-signed for your daughter and son-in-law? That's the one, I said, my voice steady. I sipped my coffee slowly, staring out the diner window at the falling leaves, as Dale confirmed what I already knew. Without me, that mortgage was dead in the water. And if I pulled my name from it, well, let's just say Mark wouldn't be quite so smug at the breakfast table. That night, when I returned to the house, Mark barely acknowledged me. Lisa was distant, her eyes glued to her phone again. Neither of them noticed the faint smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Because I had just remembered something important. Power doesn't always come from shouting the loudest. Sometimes it comes from quietly holding the one card no one else knows you have. And I had that card. Soon, Mark and Lisa would learn exactly what it meant to treat me like a servant in the very home I'd helped them build. 2 days later, I came downstairs to find the living room buzzing with voices. Mark's parents had come over, and they were sitting on the plush leather couch I had partly paid for when the furniture budget ran short. They laughed and sipped wine Lisa had pulled from the cabinet, while I hovered in the doorway like some kind of stranger. "There he is," Mark said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The tenant." Everyone chuckled. Everyone, except me. Lisa's mother gave me a look, sweet on the surface, but smug underneath. "Oh, Tom, it must be so nice having a roof over your head at your age. Lisa and Mark are just so generous." My jaw tightened. Generous. They had taken my money, my signature, my years of sacrifice, and now it was painted as their charity. Mark added, "Yeah, he's been really struggling, you know. We had to take him in. Kind of like adopting a stray cat." The room erupted in laughter again. I didn't say a word. I just sat quietly in the corner armchair, feeling their words dig into me like splinters. But with each insult, something hardened inside me. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, the glow from the overhead light casting long shadows across the counters. I spread out the papers Dale had sent me. Copies of the mortgage agreement, the co-signer responsibilities, the repayment history. My name, Thomas Reed, was right there on every page, bold and undeniable. Without me, there was no house. Without me, Mark's empire of smugness collapsed overnight. The next morning, I drove to Dale's office at Cedar Valley Bank. He greeted me with a firm handshake. "Tom, I thought about what you asked," he said. "It's not complicated. If you pull your guarantee, the bank can call in the loan. And given Mark's spotty credit, well, Let's just say he wouldn't stand a chance. I nodded slowly. That's what I figured. He leaned in, lowering his voice. Are you sure you want to do this? It could get ugly. I stared out the window at the rows of cornfields stretching to the horizon, the autumn wind rustling through the stalks. Dale, I said quietly, they've already made it ugly. On the drive back, I rehearsed it in my head, how I would tell them, how their smug laughter would die in their throats when they realized what they stood to lose. But something told me to wait. Timing was everything. That evening at dinner, Mark made another crack. Tom, you really should consider a retirement home. You'd be more comfortable there, you know? We can't keep babysitting you forever. Lisa gave me a quick glance, but again, she didn't speak up. I put my fork down, my hands steady. You might be right, Mark, I said. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I should make some changes, he smirked. Glad you're finally seeing sense. But if he'd looked closer, he would have seen the faint smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Because the changes I was planning weren't the kind he had in mind. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, listening to the hum of the furnace and the faint sound of Mark's laughter drifting from down the hall. I thought about all the years I'd sacrificed for Lisa, working overtime shifts at the steel plant, skipping vacations, driving a rusty truck so she could have a decent car in high school. I had given her everything, and now she let her husband treat me like I was nothing. But soon, the balance would shift. Mark thought he held all the power in this house, but I was about to remind him who really did. The perfect opportunity came a week later. Lisa and Mark had invited half the town over for a Sunday football party. The living room smelled of chili and hot dogs. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, and every TV in the house was tuned to the game. I sat quietly in my corner chair again, ignored as usual, watching as Mark played the charming host. He slapped backs, poured drinks, and made sure everyone knew just how successful he was. Bought this place all on my own, he bragged to one of his buddies. Didn't need a dime from anyone. I nearly choked on my coffee. Lisa glanced at me nervously, but once again, she said nothing. That hurt worse than Mark's lies. By halftime, after the laughter, the shouting, and the clinking of beer bottles, I knew it was time. I stood up slowly, my knees creaking, and the room fell oddly quiet. Mind if I say a few words? I asked. Mark grinned. Oh, this should be good. The old man wants the mic. He handed me the remote like it was a microphone, his friends chuckling behind him. I didn't smile. I just pulled out a folded envelope from my jacket pocket. See this? I said, holding it up. This is the mortgage agreement for this house. And right here, I tapped the page, is my name. Without it, none of this exists. The room went silent. The only sound was the faint buzz of the TV announcer in the background. Mark's smirk faltered. What the hell are you talking about? I took a step closer, my voice steady. I co-signed this mortgage. My credit, my years of hard work, my reputation. This house stands because of me. And if I walk away, so does everything you've built here. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One of Mark's friends muttered, Is he serious? Mark laughed nervously, waving his hand. He's bluffing. Old man doesn't know what he's saying. But I wasn't bluffing. I held up another document, Dale's letter from the bank. I spoke with Cedar Valley Bank last week. If I pull my guarantee, they'll call in the loan immediately. And we both know you can't cover it, Mark. His face turned red, his jaw tightening as whispers spread among the guests. Lisa stood up finally, her voice shaking. Dad, what are you doing? I turned to her, and for the first time that night, my voice cracked. I'm showing you the truth, Lisa. I gave you everything I had, and you let him treat me like a burden, like trash in my own family. But I'm not powerless. Not anymore. Mark slammed his beer bottle down on the counter. You wouldn't dare. I looked him straight in the eye. Try me. The silence that followed was heavier than any I'd felt in my life. Some of the guests shifted uncomfortably, murmuring to each other. One finally said, "Mark, is it true? Did your father-in-law really co-sign?" Mark's lips tightened, but he didn't answer. That was answer enough. I slipped the papers back into my jacket and nodded. "Enjoy the rest of your party. Just know the countdown has already started. You'll hear from the bank soon enough." And with that, I walked out the front door, leaving behind the stunned silence, the spilled drinks, and Mark's crumbling pride. As I climbed into my truck, I couldn't help but smile. The tables had finally turned. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Dale from the bank called me again. His tone was polite, but I could hear the curiosity beneath his words. "Mr. Thompson, I just wanted to confirm, are you officially withdrawing your co-signer guarantee on your son-in-law's mortgage?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm, steady. "I want it in writing today." Dale hesitated. "That will trigger an immediate review. Given their current finances, the loan will almost certainly be called in." "That's the idea." When I hung up, I sat back in my recliner, staring at the quiet house around me. For once, it didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. 3 days later, Mark and Lisa showed up at my front door. Not with smiles, not with casseroles, not with respect. With rage, Lisa's eyes were red, her hair unkempt. "Dad, what have you done?" Mark shoved a crumpled letter into my chest. It was from the bank. "They're calling the loan in 30 days. 30 days? You've ruined us." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Mark. You ruined yourself the moment you decided to mock me in my own daughter's house." Lisa's voice cracked. "We'll lose everything." I felt a pang of guilt, but it didn't last. I'd lived through decades of sacrifice, of long shifts at the steel mill, of scraping pennies together so my daughter could go to college. And this was the thanks I got? I shook my head. "Maybe losing everything is the only way you'll learn what really matters." Mark stepped closer, his fists clenched. "You think you've won? You think the town will side with you after this? They'll see you for what you are, a bitter old man who destroyed his own daughter's family." I smiled faintly. "Or maybe they'll see you for what you are, a man who bragged about a house he never could have bought without me." The silence that followed was sharp, deadly. Mark's face twisted in fury, but Lisa's face told the real story. For the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes, maybe even shame. They stormed off the porch, Mark cursing under his breath. Word spread fast in Cedar Rapids. Small towns thrive on gossip. And this was the juiciest story of the year. People whispered in diners, at church, in the grocery aisles. Some pitied Lisa, but most shook their heads at Mark. I overheard it myself one morning at the corner diner. A waitress poured my coffee and whispered, "Heard you finally stood up to that son-in-law of yours. About time someone put him in his place." It wasn't joy I felt then. It was something deeper. Relief. By the end of the month, the house was gone. Foreclosure notices slapped across the front door. Moving trucks rumbling down the street. Neighbors watching from their lawns as Mark's empire crumbled in broad daylight. Lisa moved into a small apartment across town. Mark disappeared for weeks at a time. Rumor had it chasing odd jobs just to stay afloat. As for me, I sat on my porch, watching the autumn leaves fall, breathing in the crisp Iowa air. I hadn't set out to destroy my daughter's marriage. I'd only wanted respect. But sometimes, justice has a way of delivering itself, piece by piece, until the scales balance. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not a burden, not a joke. A man who still had weight in this world. And that was enough. So when folks ask me if I regret what I did, I tell them the truth. No, because in the end, Mark lost the house, the pride and the lies he built his life on. And I gained back my dignity. Poetic justice, if you ask me. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.